Hey, what's up everybody? Volen here, in pursuit of art. I want to make a video for you guys that I don't think you will have ever seen anywhere before, and I know that because I've seen almost everything that's out there. I've probably seen hundreds, if not thousands, of different tutorials, DVDs, all kinds of stuff, and I've never really found the things that I'm talking to you guys about today combined or even talked about. Normally, when you watch a tutorial, what you get to see is a person starting off somewhere, most likely with nothing, and then ending up with something amazing. And you know that at any point, if you just click through the video, you know you're going to see the progress, and you also have the ultimate outcome of the professional getting the great result, right? So this is pretty much what we see all the time. Is someone starting with nothing, working on it, and then getting to the end point. And what they tell you about how they work and how they think about their work is mostly technical stuff. They'll talk about maybe the brushes that they're using or how they're thinking about the color, or Feng Zhu even talks about, like, let's say PC specs. Because to me, when he's saying that, he's so far above even being able to relate to not being able to finish a painting or just not being able to do a good drawing. He's been doing it for so very long, and he's gotten so incredibly good at it that his brain can actually just put all the things that go into it and not really have to weigh which one's most important. They just all sort of come together for him to be able to do that thing. He doesn't need to be spending a lot of time worrying about whether it'll come out or how he's going to do the next thing he's doing. He's done it so much that it's really all autopilot. So he doesn't really need to be thinking all the time, what's the most important thing? What should I do next? What should I really focus on? I mean, he does that, let's say, with his designs. He does that definitely, but for different things than what we would consider. So whereas he might be thinking of what technology is best to use for his painting, could he do that on his like home studio? Should he do it wherever because he'll need more rendering time or whatever, even though he doesn't do 3D, I think. The point being, though, is that we have a completely different set of concerns that most people doing all the professional stuff out there. We normally get stuck not in terms of getting technical information. Like, that's not really very hard. There's so many books and so many tutorials out there, and really art and drawing, the definitions of it, the concepts aren't really that hard to just communicate, but the actual application of them is infinite. Think in terms of like gravity. Okay, gravity is a really simple concept to understand. Like, just drop something, it goes to the ground. All right, great. How do you make like a rocket ship go up? How do you make something go into outer space? The definition doesn't really help you at all apply the actual force, like the actual principle. So there's, in nature, right, gravity is this force, and then you're given this very simplistic definition that basically that's just someone trying to express what it is. But that really doesn't give you at all any idea of what the actual force is, how to use it, or anything like that. So for me, that's really what's missing from most of the stuff that's out there. There's loads of awesome information, but really what people are missing are actual how to utilize all this stuff. So that's what I'm going to try and do in this video. It's not going to be a one video topic. I'm absolutely certain of that. This is probably the fifth time I'm recording this over, I think, the last 2 weeks I've been trying to get this thing done. So it's really hard to put into words what is actually something that you experience as you're doing something. But I'm going to try to do it here, and I'm going to try and do it in many other videos as I develop the channel. It's just not going to get done properly in one video, I'm sure. But follow the channel long enough, and I'm sure I'll be able to put it into words better. Okay? So what I want to start with is I'll just give you a very quick description of the study, okay? So this is basically just a color study. I'm not focusing on texture. I'm not focusing on anything, shape, any of that stuff really is a secondary concern. That's why I started the study the way I did. I was actually not gonna film this for YouTube. I was just doing this for myself. I wanted to film myself painting and then look at what I do and then just see what I could improve. To eliminate the concern for texture and just being concerned with shape and all that stuff, I started with no line drawing. Another thing I did is I only used two brushes. I used a chalk brush and no scattering, no spacing, just plain zero texture. And you can definitely see that. And people have already commented that it looks very digitally. Absolutely. The other brush I used was just a round airbrush, and that's just normally to just fill up big areas of color, to just lay things down quickly. So to eliminate basically what I'm not interested in, I don't even give myself the option of using those things. My OCD did kick in at a certain point in the study though, and I did think like, it's way too bad. I need to just correct it a tiny bit. So about an hour in, I did a light line drawing, and then I also, the only area I just used some scatter on the brushes over here because I just couldn't be doing every single leaf, because with the brushes that I was using, that was pretty much the only option. So as you can see, really no great concern for texture. The main purpose of the study was I just wanted to examine the colors, and I just wanted to basically get a good enough. I didn't want to copy it. I didn't want to go one for one. I've done that for a very long time. But basically what I wanted to do is I wanted to use this study to understand things. I've talked about this before. Studies are not so you can have something to show at the end of the day. Studies are so you actually get to explore a problem that you're interested in. I watched this tutorial recently by Shadi Safadi. I don't know how to say his name. Sorry, dude. But what he was talking about basically is people taking way too many routes and exploring way too many things. That's pretty ironic because right after I did the art school video, I made another video talking about why art education is most often so bad, is because the field is so incredibly complex and people try to teach everything that really most of it gets lost. So studies are very target oriented problem exploration devices. Like, that's how you can think of them. They're not so you can show off. They're not so you can see how good you've gotten. They're actually for you to test stuff out. So what was interesting to me, and you'll maybe get to see that in the study if I don't speed it up too much, is I was actually taking tones and I was just trying, like over here, I was rebuilding the path because I just wanted, the colors that I would have picked for the grass were so different to what they actually were that I wanted to actually explore and just see what would happen if I first put those same tones in isolation over here and they looked nothing like grass and a path, but put in context they were. So I wanted to explore that. Another thing you can see over here, the color is actually pretty off, and that was pretty much me testing when does subtlety and beauty turn into garish, way too much color. Now you can see I've overdone it quite a bit and I've broken it. So a good thing to do with studies is that's when you can actually afford to break stuff. With digital stuff, you can always go back, but with a study even more, just like don't stop just see how far you can go, and then, okay, that was bad, I need to tone it down. So you can see loads of areas that need toning down. Again, it's not about the actual study. Now let me go into the two aspects that really go into any single study. Now, again, I talked about people saying about tools. Most people will just describe the tools that they're using, show you exactly how they're using them, and then just really, it's not even hoping, it's just basically think that once they've shown you how they do it, then you'll be able to do it as well. But the thing that you need to realize is that tool usage is one skill, mindset is another skill, and I suppose there's probably another skill that could be added that's even more invisible, and that's just acquired implicit knowledge. So you've looked at the tools for so long, you've used them so much that you've developed what's called tacit knowledge. Okay, so this is automatic, you basically automated tasks. So first time you're doing something, you're pretty clunky at it, you're bad, it takes you a while. Everyone would probably use the bicycle example. You get on the bike, you fall off the curbs, you fall off the bike, cars almost smash into you or you smash into cars, everything goes wrong. Stay on that bike for a week though, and you can't even remember what was so scary. You might still be scared, but in a month or 2 months or 6 months, you get on the bike, you just go to work, you don't even see bike riding as a thing anymore. And that's why people neglect the mindset thing so much, and tacit knowledge, which is even more invisible, no one even mentions. Tool usage is not knowing about tools, it's having used them so much and appropriately in developing good habits that you do that automatic and super fast. So about this study, what are the tools and what are the mindsets? So the tools are, I use 2 brushes. Like I said, it's only going to be a 2-brush study. So that pretty much, once you define what tools you're using, then that constrains your options. So once you know, okay, it's only going to be 2 brushes, then you need to figure out if it's going to be 2 brushes, then what does that mean? Well, it means that I'm not going to have texture. So I'm eliminating texture. I'm also not going to have a very easy way to put color down. So I'm going to have to be color picking meaning selecting colors a lot and laying them down. So I'll have to figure out a good way to lay down base colors to basically, once you define what tools you're going to use, say instead of two brushes in Photoshop, instead of just painting is a tool, but you could also say, all right, for this image, I'm defining Photoshop plus ZBrush, let's say, or you're defining Maya plus key, whatever. You're defining, those are tools again. So once you define the tools, you're defining constraints. So I got two brushes only that I'm going to use. I eliminate texture, I eliminate concerns about shape and all that stuff. I'm only going to be focusing on accurate color picking, seeing how colors go together, and when am I actually going to break this thing and I've pushed it too far. So that's another tool that I'm going to be using. This tool now, instead of an actual physical tool like Photoshop, which is like software, this is now a mental tool. This video is going to be even crazier than I thought it would be. So this is now a mental tool. So I'm using my accuracy of color observation. That's another tool that I'm going to be using actively. That's going to be one of my main key players when I'm doing this, is going to be my accuracy of color observation. It's also going to be experimentation with what's on there. So I'm not really constrained by shape. Once you define constraints about the tools you're going to use, that also eliminates constraints of what you have to reproduce. So when I only define two brushes, and that's a constraint in a way, meaning that I'm gonna be having to do a lot of things manually, but that also eliminates a whole huge chunk of, I'm not gonna worry about texture at all, I'm not gonna worry about shape, I'm not gonna at all care about that. So constraints in a way are liberating, but that's probably another 6-hour video. And then another tool I'm gonna use a lot is what I call glazing. And glazing is basically this. So if I lay down a base tone, so I'm gonna use this red, and I wanna shift this red into a warm hue, I'm just gonna get a brush basically. You can see I lowered the opacity, so I get it to, let's say, 40. I can get it down to 20, and you do that by just using one of the number keys on your keyboard. And then if I just go over the top of it just a few times, you can see I've shifted the red into the warms, and I can also glaze it with some blue over on the other side, and I'm gonna shift that same red into cooler tones now. So now I have the neutral red that I started with, I have a warmer red, and you can see over here, and I have a cooler red, which basically what happens is that the color pretty much that you lay down gets, let's say if I select the orange over here, and when I glaze it, it's gonna move my slider from over here to over here pretty much. So it's gonna basically just average those two. So if I have my middle tone here and then the other one over here, when I glaze with this one over this one, they just basically come closer together. So that's pretty much what happens with glazing. And for me, it's very useful when I'm doing color stuff, because I don't have to pick every single color 100% accurate all the time. I can just give it like a base and then glaze over the top of it, and it works. And then what's the mindset part? So mindset, again, is gonna be, this is gonna be about, oh, that's a weird color. This is going to be about what are the things that I'm thinking as I'm doing this study that allow me to actually do the study. Now, once I've picked my tools, those are tools that I normally don't work like that anymore. So when I picked only two brushes to do, and also to not do texture, not do shape, all that stuff, that's actually quite uncomfortable for me. Even though it seems like less work, I don't normally work like that. I like taking care that everything is as good as it possibly can be. I don't like stuff that I can see is wrong and just leaving it. But that's actually, sometimes you need to learn to leave stuff. Sometimes good is good enough, as they say. So it doesn't have to be perfect. You have to realize that once you can do something well, there probably will be something else that if you invest time into it is gonna actually elevate your whole skill set, rather than you just doing the same thing that you normally do and then just doing it over and over and over, and it always takes time, and you always spend so much time on it that you neglect to do the things that you actually should be working on. So don't be objective. The two brushes thing, that basically meant that my study is probably going to come out worse than I could do. So I had to not be objective. When I'm looking at, and don't be objective refers to also another thing, is when you're actually working on a painting, when you're working on anything. Again, as I said earlier in the video, when you're looking at people doing tutorials, you know you're going to start with nothing and end up with the awesome thing. But when you're actually working, when you're by yourself, because that's a pre-recorded video, okay? That person might have edited out so many things. And when you watch my video now, you don't get to see me yesterday recording this. I tried it 3 times yesterday, okay? At 3 separate occasions, and then I split the video into two, combined it back into one, thought maybe I'd record chunks of it, then put it to... You don't get to see any of that, okay? Well, there's a reason for that. One is because it probably doesn't look professional, but you also have to realize that what a professional image might be is not the actual work that goes into it, okay? When you get like a very nice, polished, amazing building, you don't get to see like the ditch diggers and the people that poured the concrete and all that stuff. All that stuff is hidden, and all you're presented with is the final polished product. I think that's why a lot of people quit a lot of things, is because they don't actually get to ever see work being done. They don't understand the messiness of it and the uncomfortable feelings of having no idea how this stuff is going to turn out. I think that's a huge deterrent. People are very uncomfortable with uncertainty, and when you're working on anything creative, especially, it's crucial to not be objective. Don't look at anything at any one stage and see it as the finished thing until it actually is finished. So don't be objective until you've gotten to the point where you think you've finished. Then be objective, analyze and criticize, but don't be objective as you're working. Look at it with your, I call it sort of half an hour into it eyes, okay? So that means look at what you're doing, but look at it with imagination. Look at it with potential. What could this be, rather than, my God, this is so crap. Because I did that quite a few times, and I'll get to show you in a sec. The other one I've talked about before, outcome independence. Basically, this is, don't care how it turns out. Your studies are for utility. Your studies are for you to learn. You don't care if you have anything to show at the end of the day. You don't care if you're going to make yourself feel better about what you have to show. It doesn't really matter. Most often, you have to, that's again, it's the same over here. You have to be used to the messiness. You have to know that it has to be messy before it gets good. You put the scaffolding around the building, then you take it down. But you do need to put the scaffolding on there. And it looks messy and it looks like it's in construction, because it is. Once it's done being constructed, then you can take that off. Then you can afford to not be messy. And perseverance. Basically, if you don't stick with something long enough, I think that's a key issue for most people, is that they would just start something. And I've seen people send me stuff, and I'm really happy when someone sends me something and they say like your stuff helped me. Like, this is how much better I got because of what I saw. And that feels awesome. But one thing that people don't realize is actually you are even more awesomer, okay? You are even better than what you think you just did, because maybe my video, because everything I do is like 12 to 15 hours long. I mean videos, not just paintings and stuff. So maybe because you see someone putting in time, that you actually realize, oh, if I just keep sticking with this thing, if I just keep developing this study or whatever, it's gonna actually get better. And yeah, that's the whole secret. If you just keep doing it, if you just incrementally keep building on something, it's gonna always get better. There was, Brad Rigney said in one of his tutorials, he said that he spent a year on this one piece. Now, I'm sure he worked on other stuff during that year, but what he meant is that he kept returning to that piece for a year. And by the end of it, it was amazing. Like, to me, that looks like a 3D rendering. But he did it 2D, no photos, no anything. And it was amazing. Why? Because he put countless hours into it. And his tutorial that he recorded, the actual DVD that was from, that was, I think, 120, 150, 160 hours. Interesting. How often? When did you ever put 160 hours into one piece? Or maybe even into any one skill. When did you put 160 hours into perspective? When did you put 160 hours into rendering? And that's just one piece. That's amazing. So perseverance is basically when you feel like, this isn't gonna work out, this is gonna be ugly, my Facebook page sucks. When you have that, you just basically, the mindset is the fuel. You can see it over here in very, very light writing to make it stylish and cool. The mindset is the fuel, and the tools are the direction. So basically, you have the mindset, which is the fuel. It's why you're going to be doing what you're going to be doing. But then the tools are, where is this actually going to go? With a lot of fuel, if you have too much fuel, if you just have like, yeah, let's go. If you have too much of the fuel, you're actually not going to go anywhere. Because one thing is, you're actually going to burn out. Imagine if you have just barrels of fuel and you just pile them all together. Most likely, instead of you finding some way to profit from it, it's just going to explode in some sort of stupid accident. That's very likely to happen. If you have all mindset and zero tools, you have a problem. If you have all tools and no mindset, then you still have another problem, which is your work might look awesome, but you have no idea why the hell you're doing it. and you might lose your inspiration. You might just not see a lot of meaning in the work. You do need to develop those two simultaneously, I believe. It might take longer to improve. I've certainly taken long enough, a lot longer maybe than most people. I just like exploring stuff and I like learning stuff. And I hope I'm not doing the actual thing that I spoke about earlier, where I'm just getting lost in all kinds of side routes and all that, which is possible. Everyone loses it in one way and then has to come back to it. The whole thing is basically a process of applying the right thing, falling off, coming back to it over and over and over. And the less you do that, the faster you improve. So mindset is fuel, tools are the direction. You need both. Just mindset, just great ideas and really a dedication to work and to want to do something, it's not enough. You need to also be doing the right thing. So you need to be combining that with good tool usage, good tool learning, good discipline learning, learning all the new stuff, learning all the techniques, the tricks, the tips, learning to be a great, awesome painter. But also don't neglect your mindset. Don't let your fuel die down. Don't burn out. Don't run the marathon like a sprint and then be dead in like a kilometer. You have to keep going for a very long time. You do need to have slow burning but powerful fuel. I think that's how you get the rocket into the space place. Okay, let's get into the actual study now. All right, so how I'm going to do this is first I'm going to sort of walk you through the mindset part. So I'm going to be playing you the study. It was 3 hours total, just over one sitting. I'm going to be playing you everything in real time, just so you get to see. I'm actually going to play it now, just so you guys get to see what it actually, I'm going to try and somehow make you experience, if possible, what it actually feels like, okay? Again, I said that a couple times already, but when you're watching professional tutorials, you have a beginning and you have an end, and you know that it's been edited in a way to show you the amazing transition between one point and the other. But when you're studying, when you're new, when you're doing stuff that, in general, not just in art, when you're doing anything that you actually don't know about, your actual art studies are a great example of this. And I said that the video I'm recording now is an example of this as well, which means that those are principles that are actually applicable to life in general. So we're applying them to art right now, but those are things that have them with you. And those are skills, basically. To me, they change your life, like literally. People tell me stuff now about inspiring them, about doing stuff that is really helping them. Like, that's awesome. But when someone says that about me, I'm like, dude, you have no idea who you're talking to. Because for years, I used to be incredibly depressed. Like, you have no idea what I actually used to be like. So for people to tell me something like that now, I mean, I can tell you that whatever change you want to have in your life, that's possible, just because I've seen it done. And for me, the things I talk about now, that's why they're so important, because I've seen them done. Like, my life hasn't changed because of art. My life has changed because of mindsets, and because of those, I'm also doing art. So to me, that's how fundamental and important they are. So you can see real time, basically, before it started, before it's been edited into the amazing study that it's actually not going to be. What it is just, I'm starting with a problem, okay? This study is a problem. I'm starting with something that I don't know much about, and my intention with the study is to learn from it. So I look at it and I see what's remarkable. Now, you've already seen this from the previous video maybe. So I look at edges, I look at actually separate elements. So this is the integration of the mindset with the technical. The mindset is I'm learning. The technical part is what is actually remarkable. So you're dissecting stuff. I'm not just lulled into believing that just because I'm painting over and over and over, that's somehow improving me. That's not necessarily the case. You need to be combining both. The mindset is I'm gonna learn from this. I'm gonna explore. The technical part is actually analyzing what is there to be extracted from this experience that I'm gonna be having. So the two are working together. So you saw first notes I made were just some notes on edges. Then I went into some color notes that I said I called coil because I want to stand out. So I'm going to be calling color coil from now on. So just very basic, simple notes. I didn't really think I need any more elaborate notes than just this. Just very general blue over here. And then just basically they're reminders of sort of key ideas. So a reminder for a bit of magenta over here, which is actually just a bit of gray. A reminder over here that this is a desaturated orange. A reminder, and actually something to observe, is that, wow, those mountains are magenta. There's quite a bit of influence coming from the light over here. Let's just go back for a sec. And then basically this is a note over the whole painting, very warm. So that's a reminder for myself, is that the whole palette is going to be a very warm palette. I'm going to be late for work. And then over here we have cooler colors, and over here we have a warmer section. You can see this grass is the same, it's going to be the same, it's supposed to be the same, but you can see the light affects it in such a way that it's extremely warm over here and very cool over here. Those are notes of interest, basically. So those are things that I want to be, because I'm going to be working on this for hours, taking the 10 minutes to just note what I'm going to be looking at is actually incredibly useful later on, because you get to know and remind yourself, why am I doing this? I'm just going to stop now. You see, it reinforces the perseverance. So the mindset, again, being reinforced and fed by the technical tools. What am I going to be learning? What do I want to get from this? And all of a sudden, I don't want to do this anymore. It sucks. It's looking weird. It's ugly. And then, oh, okay, edges. Yeah, edges are really cool. And like the soft edges of the volcano, and then but the hard edges of the smoke, and then contrasted with the actual. Okay, that's actually, I'm gonna continue doing that. So a couple of things I do, I just gave myself some swatches, just testing out some colors. And this is basically before I start, I'm testing over the painting because I can. It would be pretty cool if you can just get some paints and just go to the Louvre or something and just start smearing swatches on stuff. And like, I just wanted to see if it works, because, you know, I can just erase it just using a layer. I'm using a layer, get some cling film on. But what I'm doing is those are, after my note taking, I'm actually now testing. When I said cool and then I said warm, I'm actually testing now. What does that actually mean? Like when I say cool, where exactly is that? Is it like over here, or is it over here? And with grass, it's normally over here. It's much more warm than I would normally think. And I've also left my color palette on so you guys could see what I'm actually doing. This is my major tool use. Like I said, it's only my 2 brushes and just trying to pick colors accurately. So really that's all there is, and I've left it on screen for you guys so you could see. So I'm just testing out some swatches, just having a look at things. And I think what I'll actually do now is I'll speed up the video. So please let me know if these are useful to you and how they could be better. And as always, your likes are pretty much votes. If you don't want to leave comments, just leave me a like. That'll let me know that it's doing good. Now, I just rewound back just a tiny little bit. I went back in time, and you can see over here I was just testing the color, and I wanted to see if I reproduce the actual colors over here, is that going to be the same as the effect that it's on the actual painting? So I picked those same colors. So I got the color for the path, and I got the color for the grass, and then I just tried them out over here, and it looked absolutely nothing like what it's in the painting. So it was the exact same colors, but they had absolutely nothing to do with the effect that they have in the painting. So a big lesson for me from this study was basically context. Not just context for like color, for how you perceive color, but it's actually when you put colors in expected context, that's when they begin to read as an actual object. So for me, that was key. So I just tried it out over here. If you rewind back just a tiny bit, you'll get to see just a smear of orange and yellowish sort of colors together. Absolutely nothing like grass. And then I painted over here a little bit, and it looked exactly like what it's supposed to be. So keeping on with the study now and beginning, you can see laying down some huge tones. So the strategy, the technical strategy, is basically laying down the major tones first. So starting big to small, that's a tool. Starting big to small. It's also the mindset of handling big problems before you get tangled down in smaller problems. So I do huge masses in areas of color. I define the cool and I define the warm area. And I also define over here, just as a note, I have a very light underpainting, you could call it. And one thing actually, another thing that I forgot to mention about the study is it's only done on 1 layer. There was only 1 layer. So 2 brushes, 1 layer. Forgot to say, that's probably important. You can see I block in some stuff with, sorry, just pause the video. I block in some stuff with the airbrush first to get very soft tonal gradation. So I'm actually trying to blend colors. When I'm first starting out, I don't want to have anything that's too jagged, too edgy. I don't want to have anything that's going to basically constrain me in any way. So I start very soft, very broad. Once I've done that though, then you can see I actually started with my chalk brush and I laid down some choppy transitions, especially for where I'm going to have harder edges. I make them choppy. This is not a strategy that I was thinking of when I was doing it. This is actually something I sort of saw as I was watching the video. I saw, okay, that's an implicit strategy I'm using. And that's what I told you guys earlier about tacit knowledge. Tacit knowledge being the memorization, or just basically doing a skill in a way that's been automated and memorized. So I've done this long enough for now that my brain, thankfully, is smart enough to pick up patterns of what works and what doesn't for a certain skill. And my brain is just playing back best possible scenario. That's why experience is key. It's not just because you get better by doing stuff. It's because your brain is so amazingly smart, guys. I want to keep hammering that into you. I write about it all the time, and I'm going to talk about it all the time. Your brain is so smart that even if you're stupid, like me, even if you're incredibly stupid and you never learn the right thing, your brain is still going to be like, dude, we're just going to do this differently this time. And your brain just basically picks up the best possible combinations of things and helps you do them. That's why when you're learning, especially when you're starting out and you all of a sudden feel like, whoa, this is so much better than yesterday. How come? Well, your brain, dude, why do you think? Why do you think it's better? It's not that like some magical force is guiding your hand. It's your brain is like, nah, I'm tired of doing that. That just makes us sad at the end of the day. We're going to do the smart thing. Let's continue on with the study now. I have to get to work. I had to get to work a while ago. So laying down more tones now. Basically, like I said, start from big to small, and then after the big parts are laid in, you then break it down into medium parts. Same as problem solving, guys, in general. You start with the big problems, you work it down to smaller problems. So it's always biggest, so especially because this is all in one layer. First was the background layer going in, so all the base color that's going to be showing through, including that blue over here. I lay down all the base colors, and then I start layering in smaller, which actually in the grand scheme of things are large details pretty much. Then you go down to medium, and then you also start from the whole thing, which if you rewind the thing and watch it again, I start with like sky and landscape, sky and land, sorry. I start with the really big areas, and then after those are done, then you can see I actually start and segment things. So I spent quite a bit of time over here, then I spent quite a bit of time over here, then I'm going to spend some time over here. So you're starting with the big thing, and then you're making that into smaller things, and then those turn into smaller things. So it's really, if you've ever seen like a 3D rendering program, the way it does stuff is like you get like a little square and it's just rendering your frame for you, and it's just going like, it almost looks like a typewriter, just going and cleaning stuff up. This is pretty much sort of what it looks like. Not necessarily in that order all the time, but you will go from here, you will go here, you will go here, you will go here. So those have just leveled up. All those areas are now better. Then you start over, you go all over the place, and you just level them up a little bit more. You can see I've laid down almost all the big colors pretty much. After that, I'm laying down the large different transitions. Then I'm laying down little notes basically that are defining whether something's going to be warm or cool. You can see those tones for the moment at least are pretty close, so they have to be differentiated. That's why I'm going to be using the glazing. But for now, you can see I'm just trying to differentiate areas by color. I think I might speed up the video just a tiny bit more. So just sped up the video just a tiny bit more. Hopefully for your guys' benefit and mine as well. I really have to get to work. So like I said, just going and improving separate areas now. But really, they're not separate. They're the whole piece. But mentally, you separate it into, let's say, the cool zone, the warm zone, and then over here, the focal point pretty much. So you separate those mentally, but you're always trying to improve all areas pretty much almost equally, depending on the subject matter. Sometimes you might want to really understate something to play something else up a lot. In this case, though, really with just the landscape, is just building everything up, especially because it's a color study as well. So as you can see, and as I told you before, I was a bit unhappy with just my general composition, and just basically a minor adjustment that I wanted to make. It's nothing that I'm going to spend too much time on. This is not what the study is about. So whenever your OCD kicks in, just indulge in it a tiny bit if you have to, just so you are willing to keep working on whatever you're working on. But then don't spend too much time on it. Like this whole thing was probably just a minute or two, and that's all. So afterwards, I just used the smudge tool to just push some things around to get them to where they need to be, and then from then on I continue. Like I said, this study doesn't really have any texture brushes or anything like that. So as you can see, what I'm forced to do basically is just every single little dent and every single little color variation that you see, I have to put that in manually. Now, this is not necessarily the best way to actually do work. This is not how you'll be painting stuff. This is basically just for my own benefit and as a challenge. So like I said, when I was doing the mindset thing, it actually really made me question of, Actually, this is a good point to maybe just stop the video right here, or maybe rewind back just a tiny bit and show you. When I'm over here, a few times into the video, I was actually thinking of, I'm just not gonna do this. Like, this is just, it's not gonna come out okay. I don't really think that this is useful, and why am I painting with only two brushes and all of that stuff? So basically, I was doubting whether this thing is gonna pull through. Now, when I told you guys, don't be objective, look at this right now. Does this look like it's gonna be like this? Again, this is a video, so you can just go to the end. You already know the outcome, it's pre-recorded. But in the moment, in actually doing that thing, this didn't feel at all like it was gonna come out and be like this. And this is don't be objective, which is don't look at it as it is right now. Imagine if you submitted this to anyone. Like, what critique would you get? Now, to you, it might be, well, it's sort of the general idea down. We get deceived in pretty weird ways. Like, sometimes you know that your skill is better, but the work that you've just produced really isn't any good, but still, because you know you're better, you sort of have this like deceitful sort of idea about yourself. And this is a cognitive bias that we pretty much always, all the time, exaggerate and are overly optimistic about what we can do. Whereas in reality, we are probably a bit less, quite a bit less than what we think we are. So if you actually submit this to someone just thinking that, yeah, I can finish, whatever. If you actually did that, then the objective analysis of it is it's crap. So if you ever stop and just look at it, it's like, this is unfinished. No one could possibly know that you know better than what you've done. So that's why you have to look at your work, first of all, with the eyes of the future, right? You have to think of it in terms of 20, 30 minutes from now. What is every single piece gonna be like? And if I just let it play a bit more, what is it actually gonna be like? So when it's sped up by 1500%, it's easy to see how quickly improvements are. But if you just watch the beginning of the thing again, when it's not sped up, if you actually just look at it real time, you can see how slow these changes accumulate. And this is like you're learning, like I already said before. This is like the actual learning process. It's so very slow that no one can see. But one good thing I can tell you about is that everything is so very slow. If you're into weight training or whatever, I used to have this when I was lifting weights when I was a kid, progress is so very slow that you can only really accumulate quality, let's say muscle or strength, whatever it is you're after. Whatever quality you're after, that will accumulate only after years of work. But the good part is that once you get a few years into it, people will look at you and like, can't even believe that you've done that. So then they'll think you're cheating, which when you get to that stage, that's good. Congratulations. So the mindset part is don't be objective. Like, look at the video just from, I don't know, half an hour ago. Nothing. There's nothing there. Half an hour in, okay, it's beginning to sort of look like it. Half an hour in again, yeah, it's getting even closer. More and more colors have been laid down. More and more, if you don't think of it in terms of color, but in terms of basically strategic elements. So I'm doing the right thing as often as I can, laying down the correct colors as often as I can. And they are often overstated. So like you can see, I actually see a little bit of a hue shift over here towards cyans. My cyan is like completely over the top. But one thing is that's a mental note to me that there's going to be cyan there. And another thing is I'm comfortable enough by now to just be okay with the fact that something doesn't look okay right now. And if you think of the eyes of the future, again, your art training, your career, whatever it is, it might look just like this right now. But think of it in terms of, I'm going to do as many right things as I possibly can. Look, even if you don't get to where you want to go, even if this study wasn't amazing in the end, even if your career isn't to be, even if it's not meant to be that you are number one, you don't have to be the number one to be happy. It doesn't necessarily need to be that. I was happy when I did the study because I just got to learn a bunch of cool stuff. Now, if you're content with that, then there's really no limit to where you can go. Now, mindset part, sort of done. Not really, but what I can think of right now, without being fired, hopefully. I'm just going to continue with the video now and just walk you through to the end of it. Only a few minutes left, so hopefully everything will be okay by then. So as you can see, just laying down more and more of the right things in the right places. Now over here, you can see me zoom in. This is me studying again. I was actually trying to figure out why my gradation wasn't working out at all. My colors didn't look at all as intense as the ones in the reference. So I went and I took some time to look at it. Now, this doesn't mean that it's not really cheating. It's not any of that stuff. A lot of people have the idea that you should be doing stuff correctly and all the time. This is really not how the world works. You should take time to investigate any single thing that you know you can stand to be improved in. So me going over there and just having a look, and it was pretty surprising because the color was actually almost into the greens. Like, that's how intense it was. That it was more shifted than I would have gone. And a lot of what studies do is actually help you push your work more towards extremes. So normally everyone when they begin, we're pretty rigid. If you do like figure drawing studies and things like that, you'll notice that your figures, especially from imagination, are most likely very stiff. And if you think of like an actual figure, like a ballerina or something, it's not a thing. But if you think of like a ballerina or an athlete, they all start stiff. Like, it's not just a character quality that you get, that some people just do their figures dynamic and others do them stiff. Everyone always starts sort of stiff. Like, most people might be able to just move their figure a bit more than another person just starting out might, but that's just because sort of previous experience and also how they think about things, how much they're willing to exaggerate and risk. One thing I just want to point out in the study is you can see this area is pretty much a lot underdeveloped and lagging compared to the other areas. So it's pretty much really, again, what you're interested in. Like, this area didn't really hold too much of an interest. It was mostly the colors over here that were really what I was focused on. So I was okay with that area lagging behind a little bit. More and more tiny details, not using texture or anything like that, really adds a lot of time to what you're doing. What it does pay off in one thing is just patience, teaching you to do things, and again, to persevere even when you're not sure if it's going to come out. So me doing it with only 2 brushes was in a way to just make it more difficult, more challenging. I wanted to see if I could do it regardless. So it was pretty frustrating. It's not something that I would do very often. It's not something that's necessarily useful to do all the time, but setting challenges for yourself is a great way for you to grow. And just if something is getting easy, find a way to make it more difficult. If not for technical improvement, just so you can test your mindset. Like, could you still do it? Would you still be willing to do it? Would you figure out the way to handle that problem? Because really, problem solving could translate into anything. If you're able to stick it in there and figure out a way to do something a harder way, then really once you get your texture brushes back and everything else, you'd be so much more appreciative of what you could do. Like, one thing I've started doing recently is just using my brushes, not just to slap paint around, not just to like stamp them all over, but to actually be more strategic. I've started trying to actually emulate texture better. I've started trying to figure out patterns of texture, and first I might do it exactly as I'm doing this study. I might try and just literally paint every single tiny little facet of a texture. Then once that's done, I'll try and emulate it with a brush as quickly as possible. So really, there is nothing wasted, guys. That's really what I want to say is, no matter how you're doing things, as long as you are being strategic and learning and extracting things from everything, you should be like a sponge taking stuff, like a leech, just taking stuff. I mean that in a bad way. When it comes to studying, you should be a leech. Like, you should try and get as much as you possibly can from what you're doing. When you have a good teacher, you should try and just like, hey, that was awesome. So just be a leech in terms of studying. Get all the good stuff that you possibly can. And then this is the time that I told you guys that I use my texture brush to get some of those treats in. And I've actually disabled now the cursor, so you can just see how this stuff is getting built without the cursor getting in the way. So you can just see the separate elements just being put together. And you can see really the first 20 to 30 minutes was when almost everything was done. I mean, all the bigger shapes and all that stuff, like everything was blocked in and established. So you get the most kick out of the first 10, 20 minutes. And then the rest, almost all the rest is just drudgery. There's really 3 stages to a painting, the way I see it. First 10 to 20 minutes is incredible enthusiasm. You're so happy about what you're doing. Then the middle part is the longest part, which is where you lose your enthusiasm completely, think of giving up multiple times, and then just continue on out of some complete desperate need to just get this thing done. And then once you're done with that, when you get to the end part, then your motivation kicks in again, and you're like, this could actually be awesome if I just do the right things. This is pretty much the end of the study. It's probably the end of my employment as well. I really need to get going now. I hope you got a lot of value from this. I hope it was useful. I hope this was a tutorial like you've never seen before, but in a good way. I've said many times before, if you like it, please like it. Makes sense. If you are on social media or whatever, please share it. If you think people need it, don't just share because I say, share if you think people need it. It helps the channel, it helps it gets found, it helps people see it, because when they do, I get really good feedback and I'm really happy that people are liking it. It's just that not a people know about it. But that's cool too, because in time that'll change as well. Perseverance and the mindset, the fuel and the tools. Let's get this done. I'll see you guys soon. Thank you very much if you've made it to the end. I've said this before, this is my second master study, almost maybe even longer. If you made it to the end, I'm your best friend, and I'll see you soon.